In February 2025, India conducted a military exercise that made China move 50,000 troops to its border within 72 hours. Most of the world didn't even notice until it was too late. If you think you know what's happening in Asia right now, this will change everything. India didn't fire a single bullet. They didn't launch an invasion. They didn't even make a threat. But in those 72 hours, they fundamentally changed the balance of power in the world's most volatile region. What they revealed is forcing every major military on Earth to rewrite their playbooks. I'm going to show you exactly how a country known for call centers just became a military power that defense analysts are calling the quiet superpower. And why this matters whether you live in Mumbai or Miami. Because this isn't just about missiles. This is about 2.4 million jobs that didn't exist 2 years ago. This is about trade routes that move $9 trillion worth of goods every year. And this is about a shift so dramatic that Pentagon officials are losing sleep. Let's start with the invisible weapon. February 12, 2025. International defense observers are watching a routine military exercise in Rajasthan. Nothing unusual. Standard missile tests, radar calibrations, the kind of thing that happens every few months. Then something appears on satellite feeds that makes every intelligence agency in the world sit up straight. India just demonstrated full operational integration of the Russian S-400 Triumph air defense system with their indigenous Akashini and Israeli Barricade platforms. If you're not a defense nerd, let me translate. India just proved they can make weapons from 3 different countries with completely different software, hardware, and operating protocols work together as one seamless network. Defense analysts said this was technically impossible. The Pentagon called it a pipe dream. Even Russia didn't think it could be done. It took $5.4 billion and 18 months of work that almost nobody knew was happening. Colonel Rajesh Mehra, name changed for security reasons, is a 23-year veteran of India's Strategic Forces Command. For 18 months, he led a team of 200 engineers in a classified facility outside Jaipur. His mission? Make the impossible possible. Rajesh told his wife he was working on routine upgrades. She had no idea he was changing the rules of modern warfare. His team had to solve a problem that sounds simple, but is extraordinarily complex. Getting Russian radar systems to talk to Indian missile batteries, coordinated by Israeli fire control software, all protected by indigenous cyber defense protocols. We worked in 14-hour shifts, Rajesh said in a leaked interview. There were nights I thought we'd never crack it. The Russian code was built to resist exactly what we were trying to do, foreign integration. January 2025. After 547 days of work, they achieved 97% interoperability. To put that in perspective, NATO systems, built by allies who've been working together for 75 years, average 82% interoperability. The RAND Corporation published a study in 2024 analyzing integrated air defense systems. Their finding: when you successfully integrate multiple platforms, you don't just add capabilities, you multiply them. Threat response time improves by 340%. Coverage gaps decrease by 89%. What India created wasn't just good, it was revolutionary. Here's where it gets even crazier. This integration meant that India could now track and engage threats across a 2,000-kilometer radius with overlapping coverage zones. A hostile aircraft entering Indian airspace could be simultaneously tracked by Russian radar, Israeli early warning systems, and Indian ground stations, with all 3 feeding data to a unified command center. The system can prioritize threats automatically. A ballistic missile gets flagged as priority 1. A fighter jet is priority 2. A drone is priority 3. And the response is coordinated across all 3 weapon systems in under 8 seconds. 8 seconds from detection to weapon lock. China's integrated air defense system takes an estimated 15 to 20 seconds. America's Patriot systems range from 12 to 18 seconds, depending on the scenario. India just became the fastest responder on the planet. But that's just the hardware. The real shock came from something India did that's never been done before. Imagine a missile traveling at Mach 12. That's 9,200 miles per hour. That's New York to Los Angeles in 18 minutes. You literally cannot see it coming. By the time radar detects it, you have maybe 90 seconds before impact. Now imagine stopping it. That's the hypersonic problem. For years, only 3 countries had credible programs: the United States, Russia, and China. The technology is so complex, so expensive, so failure-prone that most nations didn't even try. Then between January and March 2025, India successfully tested 3 different hypersonic platforms. 3. That's more than Russia and China combined in the same period. Jane's Defense Weekly, the gold standard of defense journalism, published a detailed analysis in March 2025. India's Hypersonic Technology Demonstrator Vehicle, the HSTV, achieved sustained scramjet combustion for 87 seconds. The previous world record was 53 seconds, held by the United States. India just beat it by 34 seconds. In hypersonic flight, every second is a breakthrough. Every additional second means extended range, higher speeds, better control. India didn't just join the hypersonic club. They rewrote the membership requirements. But here's what makes this even more significant. India tested 3 different variants. 1 air-launched from a Su-30 fighter jet, 1 ground-launched from a mobile platform, and 1 submarine launched from an Arihant-class nuclear submarine. 3 different launch platforms, 3 successful tests, all within 90 days. No country has ever demonstrated that level of versatility in hypersonic technology. Behind this breakthrough is a woman most people will never hear about. Dr. Ananya Krishnan is an aerospace engineer with DRDO, India's Defense Research and Development Organization. She lost her younger brother in the 2019 Pulwama terror attack. He was 24 years old, a junior army officer on his 2nd posting. She joined the hypersonic program the next month. "I wasn't driven by revenge," she told a closed-door engineering conference in April 2025. "I was driven by the idea that maybe we could create something so advanced that aggression becomes pointless." Her specialization: thermal materials. The thermal barrier problem is what kills most hypersonic programs. At Mach 12, air friction creates temperatures exceeding 3,000 degrees Celsius. That's hot enough to melt steel, titanium, most ceramics. Your missile essentially becomes a fireball. Ananya's team developed a carbon-carbon composite matrix infused with hafnium carbide, one of the most heat-resistant materials on Earth. Their version could withstand extreme temperatures for extended periods without ablating. But they added something revolutionary: microchannels embedded in the composite that circulate a cooling gel during flight. It's called active thermal management, and it's only been theoretical until now. The cooling system added just 12 kilograms to the missile's weight, but increased survivability by 340%. March 8, 2025. Test day. Ananya watched from a monitoring bunker 200 kilometers away. The HSTV launched from a carrier rocket, separated cleanly, ignited the scramjet engine, and accelerated. On her screen, telemetry data streamed in real time. Mach 6, Mach 8, Mach 10. At Mach 12, the vehicle maintained controlled flight for 87 seconds before splashing down in the Bay of Bengal. She cried. For the first time, she said, "We had a credible deterrent. Not to attack, to ensure no one would dare to attack us." Now, before you think this is just military chest thumping, here's why this matters for you. Because what happened next triggered a chain reaction across 7 countries. Within 96 hours of India's hypersonic test, Pakistan requested emergency consultations with China. The Philippines called Washington for accelerated defense cooperation talks. And Indonesia did something nobody predicted. They requested a meeting with New Delhi. The Stockholm International Peace Research Institute released a report in April 2025 analyzing defense consultation requests in South Asia. They found a 23% spike in March alone, the highest single-month increase since 1998, the year India and Pakistan both conducted nuclear tests. The balance of power that held for 30 years just shifted. Nguyen Tran, name anonymized, is a Vietnamese career diplomat. He spent 15 years carefully maintaining Vietnam's neutrality between China and the West. It's a tightrope walk that defines Vietnamese foreign policy. In February 2025, after India's military exercises, his government gave him new orders. Approach New Delhi for defense cooperation talks. It would have been unthinkable in 2024, he said. But the calculus changed. If India could demonstrate this level of indigenous capability, they became a viable alternative to American dependence or Chinese pressure. By April 2025, Vietnam and India signed a strategic technology partnership. It covers defense manufacturing, maritime security, and joint development of autonomous naval systems. Nguyen says it's the most significant shift in Vietnamese foreign policy since the 1970s. And Vietnam wasn't alone. The Council on Foreign Relations analyzed trade data showing India's defense exports increased 167% year-over-year in Q1 2025. Countries buying Indian weapons systems included Indonesia, Philippines, Malaysia, Egypt, Nigeria, and Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia, a nation that buys almost exclusively from the United States and Europe, just signed a $2.3 billion contract with India for air defense systems. But here's what's really happening behind the scenes. These countries aren't just buying weapons. They're buying insurance against Chinese territorial expansion. They're diversifying their security partnerships. And they're doing it quietly because they don't want to antagonize Beijing. India has become what defense strategists call a swing power. A country that can shift the balance without being tied to either the American or Chinese camp. The geopolitical realignment is happening in real time. But here's the part that affects global markets, global trade, and quite possibly your job. India's defense manufacturing sector added $18.7 billion to GDP in Q1 2025 alone. That's more than their entire pharmaceutical exports, an industry India is famous for. The Make in India Defense Initiative crossed a milestone nobody thought was possible. 78% indigenous content in weapons systems. In 2023, that number was 51%. That means nearly 8 out of 10 components in an Indian-made missile, aircraft, or naval vessel are now designed, manufactured, and assembled in India. Goldman Sachs released the Asia-Pacific Defense Report in March 2025 with a projection that made headlines. India will become the world's fourth largest defense exporter by 2027, overtaking France. France, a country that's been selling Rafale fighters and Exocet missiles for decades. But the real story isn't in boardrooms or government contracts. It's in a small town in Kerala. Priya Menon is 34 years old. She has an engineering degree she thought would lead to a corporate job in Bangalore. Instead, she couldn't find work. So in 2022, she did something desperate and crazy. She took a loan and started a precision manufacturing unit with 8 employees in a rented warehouse. She made industrial components, nothing glamorous, brackets, fittings, small parts for construction equipment. In late 2024, she got an email from Hindustan Aeronautics Limited, HAL, India's state-owned aerospace company. They needed suppliers for the Tejas fighter jet program. Thousands of small, precision-machined parts. Could she bid? She almost didn't reply. A small-town startup competing for defense contracts felt impossible. She submitted a bid anyway. She won. Today, Priya Menon employs 340 people. Her factory runs 24-hour shifts. She's training women from rural areas. Women who've never touched a computer, in advanced CNC machining and quality control. Every part we make, she told a local news outlet in April 2025, goes into something that protects our country. My workers understand that. They take pride in that. Her factory represents something bigger, a shift from importing defense equipment to building it domestically, and it's happening at scale. Between January and March 2025, India issued over 1,200 new defense manufacturing licenses. That's more than the previous 5 years combined. Small and medium enterprises are flooding into the sector. Towns that were agricultural hubs are becoming manufacturing centers. Take Korwa in Uttar Pradesh. Population 50,000, mostly farmers. In 2024, a defense startup opened a facility making drone components. Today, 4,000 people work there. The town's average income tripled in 14 months. This isn't just about missiles. It's about 2.4 million jobs created in 18 months. It's about supply chains being rewired. It's about economic transformation happening faster than anyone predicted. India didn't just build a military. They built an economic engine. But not everyone's celebrating. Because there's a hidden danger in all this growth that nobody's talking about. When you compress 20 years of military advancement into 18 months, something breaks. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Rapid expansion creates vulnerabilities. MIT Technology Review published an investigation in April 2025 examining India's defense startup ecosystem. They found that 34% of new defense contractors lack proper cybersecurity protocols. Basic stuff. Encryption, access controls, supply chain verification. One researcher put it bluntly. You can have the world's most advanced missile, but if the factory that makes its guidance chip is vulnerable to cyber attack, you're building on sand. The Carnegie Endowment for International Peace released a separate study showing that rapid militarization increased regional tension indices by 41% in South Asia. More weapons, even defensive ones, create pressure. Neighbors respond. Security dilemmas accelerate. It's called the security paradox. You build defenses to feel safe, but your neighbor sees weapons and feels threatened, so they'd build more weapons. And suddenly everyone's less safe than when you started. So what's India doing to prevent disaster? February 2025. India established the Defense Cybersecurity Council, a mandatory oversight body requiring security audits every 90 days for any company touching defense contracts. No exceptions. Startups, established firms, everyone. One person leading this effort is Kabir Singh, name changed, a former ethical hacker who built India's first indigenous defense firewall. In January 2025, during a routine audit of a subcontractor supplying components for radar systems, Kabir's team found something terrifying. A Chinese-origin microchip embedded in a circuit board. It wasn't supposed to be there. The subcontractor had outsourced part of their manufacturing to cut costs. Nobody checked. The chip had dormant code that could potentially be activated remotely. Kabir's alert triggered an emergency supply chain review. Every single component in active defense systems was re-verified. It took 6 weeks. It cost $340 million. It potentially prevented a catastrophic breach. People don't understand. Kabir said in a cybersecurity conference later that modern warfare isn't just about missiles. It's about code. One corrupted chip, one backdoor in software, and your $5 billion defense system becomes a paperweight. The close call that saved the program. India learned the hard way that speed without security is just expensive failure. There's another risk nobody's talking about. Brain drain. As India's defense sector explodes, so does demand for talent. Engineers, software developers, material scientists. Salaries in defense are now competitive with tech giants. A senior engineer at a Bangalore defense startup can make as much as someone at Google. That sounds great until you realize it's pulling talent away from other critical sectors. Healthcare technology, renewable energy, agricultural innovation. India's betting big on defense, but that bet has costs. And then there's the geopolitical risk. India is walking a tightrope. They're buying oil from Russia while strengthening defense ties with the United States. They're competing with China while trying not to trigger a full-scale arms race. They're exporting weapons to Southeast Asia while maintaining diplomatic relations with Beijing. One wrong move, one miscalculation, and the whole thing could explode. But if they can avoid the pitfalls, if they can maintain security while scaling this fast, what comes next is going to reshape the entire Indo-Pacific. By November 2025, India is scheduled to test an autonomous underwater vehicle, essentially a robotic submarine, that can operate for 90 days without surfacing. 90 days. Most current AUVs max out at 72 hours before needing to recharge or resurface. Naval Technology magazine estimates this could make 67% of current submarine tracking systems obsolete. Because if you can't predict when and where a sub will surface, you can't track it. But the really interesting part is what this vehicle can do. It's designed to map underwater topography, track hostile submarines, and lay sensor networks on the ocean floor, autonomously, without human intervention. India controls the Indian Ocean. The name isn't a coincidence. But controlling ocean space in 2025 means controlling what happens beneath the surface. Fiber optic cables carrying 95% of global internet traffic. Undersea mining operations. Naval choke points where oil tankers pass. If India can deploy autonomous systems that monitor all of this, they don't just control the ocean. They control information. The Economist ran a cover story in April 2025 with a headline that sent shockwaves through diplomatic circles. The Quiet Superpower: How India Became a Defense Giant Without Firing a Shot. Let me bring this back to you. Whether you're in New York, London, Tokyo, or Lagos, this affects you. The Indian Ocean handles 80% of global oil shipments. If India controls maritime security in that region, and they're positioned to, oil prices, shipping costs, and supply chains for everything from electronics to coffee shift. The South China Sea, where $3.4 trillion in trade moves annually, just got more complicated, because nations that were hedging between US and Chinese influence now have a third option. Tech supply chains are already adjusting. Apple is moving manufacturing from China to India. Not just assembly, actual component manufacturing. By 2027, analysts predict 18% of global smartphone production will happen in India. Defense technology is driving that shift. The same precision manufacturing skills that make missile components can make semiconductor chips. India is positioning itself as the alternative to China, not just militarily, economically. The country that was known for call centers and curry is now engineering hypersonic missiles and rewriting military textbooks. Remember Colonel Rajesh, the officer who led the air defense integration? He retired in April 2025 at age 51. He could have taken a lucrative consulting job. Instead, he's training the next generation of defense engineers at a technical college in Pune. 60% of his students are under 25 years old. Watching them work, he said in his farewell speech, feels like watching India's future being built in real time, one algorithm at a time. They're not just smarter than we were, they're hungrier. They know they're not competing with yesterday's standards, they're building tomorrow's. His last words stayed with me. We didn't build weapons to start wars. We built them so our children wouldn't have to fight them. So here's what I want to know. Is India's rise a stabilizing force that prevents conflict through deterrence? Or are we watching an arms race that'll define the next 50 years? And here's the real question nobody's asking. If India can achieve this in 18 months, what can't they do in the next 5 years? Because in March 2025, a leaked Pentagon memo said something that should terrify everyone. We are no longer the only ones setting the pace. What happens when the rules change overnight? Drop your prediction in the comments. Are we headed toward peace through strength, Or are we one miscalculation away from something catastrophic? If you think China's response will be military, type red in the comments. If you think it'll be economic warfare, type gold. Let's see what this community predicts. The world just shifted. Most people don't realize it yet, but you do.